Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. A few days ago, I did a video about the Major General pictured here, James Birdseye McPherson, and his death, his tragic death, the Battle of Atlanta, July 22nd, 1864. A talented military leader, much beloved by his men, by the armies, and by all of his comrades who were with him back in the day at West Point. The mutual respect from generals on both sides of the conflict really struck me. And if you go search around online, you'll find testimonies of those who were closest to him. He seemed to have friends everywhere. He must have been one of the most popular guys at West Point. And now he's he's gone. He's killed in battle. And I did this video to talk about him. And I read, as you may recall, if you saw that video, I read a couple of eyewitness accounts and giving you some different perspectives from the Confederate and the Union side. One of the news briefs that popped up while I was doing that initial research has really stuck with me. It's a small piece that mentions General Grant and his reaction to the death of McPherson. I want to read it to you now because it just sticks with me and it gives you a sense of Grant the man. Oh, here it is. It's headlined General Grant and General McPherson. Intelligence of the death of General McPherson was telegraphed to General Grant on Sunday. The war-worn hero, after finishing the reading of the dispatch, retired to his tent weeping like a child, and with tears streaming down his bronzed cheeks, declared that the country had lost its ablest soldier and he his best friend. So this is reported in newspapers. A number of newspapers picked up the story in late July and early August of 1864. And for those students of the Civil War who think of Grant as the non-emotional sphinx-like character who didn't have much to say in public, and he was many of those things, but he was an emotional guy as well. And this news brief, which I believe to be true, gives you a good sense of who he was and that he could be touched and affected just like anybody else. Well, as I was doing a little bit of additional research today, I became curious to find out if there was anything more to be found related to this account of Grant. I was quite surprised to find a news story that was published about a week after this news brief came out. And this particular story originally came out in Fremont, Ohio, and there's two letters. One of them is written by McPherson's grandmother, and the other one is written as a reply to the grandmother. They're both emotional and moving, and I want to share them with you right now. The headline for this pairing of letters is General Grant and McPherson. Interesting correspondence. The subtitle is The Fremont Sentinel publishes the following letters, which explain themselves. Clyde, Ohio, August 3rd, 1864 is the date line on the first letter. This is from the grandmother. To General Grant, dear sir, I hope you will pardon me for troubling you with the perusal of these few lines from the trembling hand of the aged grandma of our beloved General James B. McPherson, who fell in battle. When it was announced at his funeral from the public print that when General Grant heard of his death, he went into his tent and wept like a child, my heart went out in thanks to you for the interest you manifested in him while he was with you. I have watched his progress from infancy up. In childhood, he was obedient and kind, in manhood interesting, noble, and persevering, looking to the wants of others. Since he entered the war, others can appreciate his worth more than I can. When it was announced to us by telegraph that our loved one had fallen, our hearts were almost rent asunder. But when we heard the commander in chief could weep with us too, We felt, sir, that you have been as a father to him, and this whole nation is mourning his early death. I wish to inform you that his remains were conducted by a kind guard to the very parlor where he spent a cheerful evening in 1861 with his widowed mother, two brothers, only sister, and his aged grandmother, who was now trying to write. In the morning, he took his leave at 6 o'clock, little dreaming he should fall by a ball from the enemy. His funeral services were attended in his mother's orchard, where his youthful feet had often pressed the soil to gather the falling fruit, and his remains are resting in the silent grave scarce half a mile from the place of his birth. His grave is on an eminence but a few rods from where the funeral services were attended and near the grave of his father. The grave, no doubt, will be marked so that passers-by will often stop and drop a tear over the dear departed. And now, dear friend, a few lines from you would be gratefully received by the afflicted friends. I pray that the God of battles may be with you, and go forth with your arms till rebellion shall cease, the Union be restored, and the old flag wave over our entire line. With much respect, I remain your friend, Lydia Slocum, aged 87 years and 4 months. Imagine that. Grandma Slocum, 87, born in the 18th century, lived to see every president from Washington through Lincoln. And here she is writing Grant, expressing her thanks. And here's Grant. He replies a week after the letter written by Lydia Slocum. And here it is. Dateline, Headquarters, Armies of the United States, City Point, Virginia, August 10th, 1864. Keep in mind, Grant is in the second month of the siege of Petersburg. He's in charge of the Eastern armies, the Western armies. He's conferring with Sherman, with Admiral Farragut, with President Lincoln, and others, determining the course of the war. And the war, unbeknownst to anyone at this point, it is less than a year from being completed. So here he is taking time out of his schedule to write Grandma Slocum. And here's what he says. Mrs. Lydia Slocum, my dear madam, your very welcome letter of the 3rd instant has reached me. I'm glad to know that the relatives of the lamented Major General McPherson are aware of the more than friendship existing between him and myself. A nation grieves at the loss of one so dear to our nation's cause. It is a selfish grief because the nation had more to expect from him than almost anyone living. I join in the selfish grief and add the grief of personal love for the departed. He formed for some time one of my military family. I knew him well. To know him was to love. It may be some consolation to you, his aged grandmother, to know that every officer and every soldier who served under your grandson felt the highest reverence for his patriotism, his zeal, his great, almost unequaled ability, his amiability, and all the manly virtues that can adorn a commander. Your bereavement is great, but cannot exceed mine. Yours truly, U.S. Grant. So there you have Grant's reply to Grandma Slocum's letter about the loss of her son, Major General James Birdseye McPherson. Till the next episode, we'll see you.